everyone, and welcome to today's session. My name is Dorota Maciejowska, and I'm representing the Jagielonian University. Just very briefly, I will tell you that I'm the head of International Relations Office and currently the chair of Academic Exchange and Mobility Working Group of Coimbra Group. I'm here with my colleagues from eLearning Center of Jagielonian University that are organizing this webinar for us. Firstly, on behalf of Professor Vincent Wirtz, I would like to welcome warmly all members of the Education Innovation Working Group of Coimbra Network. I would like to greet also my team of Academic Exchange and Mobility. Hello, everyone. And obviously, I would like to welcome warmly all participants of this webinar. And today's webinar topic is Erasmus plus virtual exchange and internationalization at home. The Erasmus plus virtual exchange project is the new initiative of European Commission. And details of this project will present today Francesca Helm and Sarah Guth that are with us. Francesca Helm is Assistant Professor of English at the Department of Political Science, Law and International Studies at University of Padova in Italy, obviously. And her research focuses on telecollaboration, intercultural dialogue and virtual exchange, as well as internationalization at home. She has published articles in many international journals, and she's also involved in several European projects. Currently, she is leading the monitoring and evaluation of European Commission's Erasmus plus virtual exchange initiative. Sarah Guth is also representative of the University of Padova in Italy. She is the lecturer in English language, and she is also consultant in virtual exchange. She worked as program coordinator for the SUNY Center Collaborative Online International Learning and continues to work as an independent contractor for oil consulting. And she carries out research on technology in foreign language teaching. So just briefly at the beginning. And before we start, maybe just before we start, just a little housekeeping. If you have any questions, there will be time to answer them at the end of the seminar. Please use your typo box on your right side of the video. If you have questions during the presentation, you can also ask them. However, we will be able to answer only for 3-4 questions, clarifying questions during the seminar, okay? Okay, so without further ado, we are moving to Padova, to beautiful Italy. Good morning, buongiorno, Padova. Possiamo cominciare?
Certo, buongiorno Cracovia. Cracovia?
Cracovia, sì, esatto. Okay, the floor is yours.
Thank you for the invitation, and thank you to the Coimbra Group for hosting this seminar.
So this is Francesca Helm, and I'm Sarah Guth, just so that you know who we are now that we've been introduced. So today we want to talk to you, as was said, about this new project, Erasmus Plus Virtual Exchange. But first, we'd like to give you some background. And we'd like to start with some definitions, because there's been a lot of debate over this kind of activity that we're going to talk about today. Has been many people have been doing it for well over a decade, but they've been using different words to describe this kind of activity. But now virtual exchange seems to be the word that lots of people are using. And in fact, we are also involved in a new project called Evolve. The leader is University of Groningen, and the Coimbra Group is actually a partner in this new project called Evolve. And in Evolve, there is the word virtual exchange. And when we had our kickoff meeting in Groningen a few weeks ago, it seemed really important that we define exactly what we meant, because we were bringing together, this project brings together, as does Erasmus Plus Virtual Exchange, many people who have been doing this type of activity in different fields for many years. And so we thought it was important to come together and agree on a definition. And so on this screen right now is the beginning of the definition that after numerous email exchanges back and forth, we finally came to. So I can leave that to you to read. But I think what's important is that it is supported by research, it is sustained, it's people to people, and I'll highlight the main points on the following slide. So the key characteristics that we consider of what we call virtual exchange is, first of all, and really the most important point we think, is that it's people to people. So it involves young people speaking directly to young people in other parts of the world. It is not teacher-centered, it is student-centered, it is person-centered. When we say sustained, we mean that it is not a one-off, it doesn't happen just once or twice, but it is communication and interaction between people over a sustained period of time. So that might be 4 weeks, 8 weeks, 10 weeks, but that it is sustained over time. It is technology enabled because we are connecting people by using different tools, even in some cases like the ones we're using this morning. And it includes regular synchronous meetings. I think in many ways, even the efforts we've made this morning so that you can see our faces and we can see your faces and we can do things and ask each other questions. It's really important to also have this kind of synchronous communication. It is facilitated, and it is facilitated, Francesca will talk about this a little more later, either by people who have been trained specifically to facilitate discussions in virtual exchange, or by the teachers and educators and professors who set up virtual exchanges. It is educational, and so the purpose is to learn more about one another, more about oneself, about other cultures, one's own culture. And it is structured to foster mutual understanding between young people, especially in this case of Erasmus Plus virtual exchange. So that's how we, as a group of experts, decided to define virtual exchange. But Francesca and I have been doing these activities for several years in Padova, and we interviewed some of our students. And so we'd like to share with you how our students would define virtual exchange after having had a virtual exchange experience. So hopefully this video will work.
A synonym of fantasy, the opportunity to talk and interact with different people from different backgrounds, different country, different places, even from different continents. An encounter between two people, or in our case, two groups that work together and can work together thanks to technology.
Virtual exchange is a portal that allows you to connect with different people from different countries around the world to tell your opinion about specific topics, to listen to another opinion, to another views also, to share your culture and to know about other cultures in the world.
It's being abroad without being abroad. It's staying in your house and having the opportunity to know new people.
Stay at home, and at the same moment you can talk with different people from different countries and with different perspective. You can share your perspective about a topic, and it's very cool.
Okay, we like to end the video on that. It's very cool because it's a learning experience, but they also enjoy it, and students often become friends as well. So, I'm going to pass it over to you.
So, one of the questions is why do virtual exchange? It's like, why do internationalization? There was a paper by Brandenburg and De Witt in 2011 called The End of Internationalization. And in this paper, they said that very often the aim, we forget the aims, we forget why we're internationalization. There's this kind of obsession with internationalization, but the question is, why are we doing internationalization? In a similar way, virtual exchange, why do virtual exchange? Virtual exchange, it's an approach, it's a pedagogic approach. And why do we do it? one possible definition, and this is commonly also used to talk about internationalization at home, is to equip learners to participate together in a global society. But then again, this is quite ambiguous. What do we mean by equip learners? What kind of global society are we talking about? And so, for example, I hope you can read this slide, but it comes from Andreotti and de Souza, and it's talking about, here there are two different interpretations perhaps of the world, if you like. So if we see the world as a structured, ordered and stable, predictable and comprehensible as a whole, then when we say we equip learners to participate, we're talking about fixed content and skills to conform to a predetermined idea of society. And participation means absorbing information, reproducing received knowledge. On the other hand, if you see the world as complex and changing, uncertain, multifaceted, interconnected, with different meanings and interpretations, which is perhaps more in line with our view of the world, then we want to equip learners with concepts and strategies and also the skills to address complexity, difference and uncertainty. And participation means assessing, interrogating and connecting information. It means generating knowledge, but also with other people, living with difference and feeling comfortable with difference and conflicts, shifting positions and perspectives according to different contexts. And perhaps this is the way we see it, and many others would perhaps agree with this. For example, we have as language educators, we were very happy to see, and a lot of other language educators shared this online, this report about from Google, saying that the competences that they were looking for, the 7 top characteristics of success at Google, are all soft skills. So being a good coach, communicating and listening well, possessing insights into others, including others' different values and points of view, having empathy towards and being supportive of one's colleagues, being a good critical thinker and problem solver, and being able to make connections across complex ideas. And this was also when we had our meeting in November at Trinity College in Dublin. We had a representative from Google Ireland, and again, she also confirmed very much the idea that these soft skills, these transversal skills, are really important for students, and yet there's very little focus on these still in higher education. And this is what virtual exchange, in a sense, seeks to address: the development of these skills and also the recognition, as we'll see later on.
Yeah, I think it's explicit versus implicit, that there's this idea that students are implicitly learning these skills in their regular courses, whereas in virtual exchange, we explicitly aim to develop these skills.
Yeah. And so we come on to the Commission's initiative. So it's just gone public, but it's been a long time in the making. So in 2016, Navraxix said he wanted to set up Erasmus Plus virtual exchanges to connect young people inside and outside the EU online and help build intercultural understanding. So since then, there's been a long process of, a feasibility study was carried out and the tender was published. And the project was officially began in January, but it's gone public on the 15th of March. And so one of the reasons is also is to complement the Erasmus mobility program. It's to allow the intercultural experience to be had by students, not just those who engage on mobility, but also to address these different skills. So it is very much a complementary project to Erasmus. And so here you can see this is a screenshot of the youth portal. Now it appears on the European Youth Portal because it's not only addressed to higher education, and I think this is very important to emphasize. It's for youth, so by youth it means young people aged 18 to 30, and informal but also non-formal education. So the European Commission is highlighting the fact that they want to address young people both inside and outside education, also because perhaps Erasmus has been seen to be elitist in that it reaches a small percentage of students at university, even fewer students outside of university education. And so the virtual Erasmus virtual exchange, there is a technological barrier, and so there's the minimum requirements for the technology to be able to participate, but in theory it can be much more inclusive than physical mobility. Okay.
So this is how they are presenting it and have presented it when the Commission made the official launch on March 15th. That it's a groundbreaking project, and this very much sums up what Francesca said. But with Erasmus Plus Virtual Exchange, there is a specific focus on the two sides of the Mediterranean. So European countries and people in the southern Mediterranean, which is basically North Africa and the Middle East. And so it's to engage them in meaningful intercultural experiences. And as Francesca said, it is not there to replace the Erasmus Plus program, but to expand the reach and scope of it. These are specific objectives that the Commission has for this specific Erasmus Plus virtual exchange project. And I think it's interesting, if you read through them, you can see that there is also a political dimension behind this, in that there are things like increasing tolerance, and they make reference to the Paris Declaration to promote citizenship and the common values of freedom and tolerance. But they also see more practical things, more kind of employability skills. So also things like critical thinking and media literacy. But again, you see the political side when it's to develop resistance to discrimination and indoctrination. So there is a clear political intention here, but also the importance of giving young students, both informal and non-formal education, the skills they need to be successful in this globalized society that we were talking about. So this is just a screenshot of, again, from the youth portal, and the quality is not quite good, but you can go to the youth portal and see it because it is live now. Basically, Erasmus Plus Virtual Exchange is based on 4 activities in this first year, which is the pilot year of the project, 2018. And the 4 different activities are online facilitated dialogue, training to develop virtual exchange projects, advocacy training, and interactive open online courses. And these different activities are being rolled out with different time schedules throughout this year, 2018. And what we'd like to focus on this morning are the 2 that you can show interest in and start engaging in right now, which are online facilitated dialogue and training to develop virtual exchange projects.
Yes, do you want to stop now for questions, or shall we carry on?
Please carry on just now, okay?
Okay. So online facilitated dialogue, this is one of the activities which consists in connecting young people, as we've said before, in non-formal dialogue for exposure to diverse views and cultures, language exchange and practice and employability skills. So the language exchange, currently the program is running in English, but the intention is also to have French and Arabic. And this occurs through, there are several different programs lasting 8 weeks and 4 weeks. And students, I think we should show.
Sure.
And currently it is managed by Solia, who have this program. So this is a program that has actually been running for many, many years. And students at the University of Padova, for example, have been taking part in this project. Oh, sorry, I've gone the wrong way.
No?
Oh, no, sorry. The intended learning outcomes of this project are for participants to gain an understanding of and empathy for the perspective and narrative of others in the group. So not only positions taken or opinions expressed, but the core issues, underlying assumptions, values, needs, and fears. In this program, students discuss the kinds of issues which are very difficult to engage in the public sphere. So religion and politics, for example, media, gender. And the idea is to create a safe space. It's been developed from the field of conflict, transformation, and peacekeeping. So it's based on the principles of dialogue and of developing an understanding of one's own perspectives and assumptions, as well as one's relationship with the issue. So it's very much relating the personal to the political, and gaining an understanding of each other's cultures and daily lives. This is a screenshot of the platform that is used for the program. So essentially, a university will sign up for the program, and students then sign up themselves individually. And the students are put into groups, and each dialogue group has, say, 10 to 12 students, no more, and 1 or 2 facilitators who have been trained following an online training. And
half of the students come from the West, or basically the United States and Europe, and the other half come from the predominantly Muslim world.
That's right. And so they meet the same group for a period of 8 weeks, or in the shortened program for 4 weeks, and they have 2 hours of video dialogue every week. They're also required to do, on some weeks they have some readings to prepare for the sessions. They also have a joint project to do where they work individually in smaller groups, so 2 or 3 students look at a particular issue from their different perspectives and write recommendations, a recommendation paper about this issue. And then they also write a final reflective paper. So just to give an example of how it can be implemented within the university. So as I said, at the University of Padova, we've been doing this program because I teach in the Department of Political Science. The issues are very relevant to the students in my program. And so we've been doing this since 2008. And until this year, the department has paid a small amount of money for the students to be able to participate in the program. But now with the Erasmus Virtual Exchange, it's actually free. So the program is, I recognize it as an alternative to, until now, I've recognized it as an alternative to an English course. So it's included as an alternative program. But also this year, we have advertised it on the university website to attract students from any degree course or department. We've also been talking to the Inclusion Office, and they have promoted the program with students, in particular for students with disabilities, and several students are taking part this year. So students complete a form, and this form is then passed on to the coordinator. So as the coordinator, I set up various in-person seminars. So we have a seminar at the beginning of the program and several debriefing sessions as the students take part in the dialogue. Students write a reflective journal every week, and then they have these synchronous sessions. Now, we currently have over 20 students participating in the program, but none of them are in the same group. So each student is in a different dialogue group with students from different countries. Then I receive a report on the attendance and on the performance of the students during and at the end of the project. And there are different ways that it can be recognized. So we're going to talk a little bit later about the official badges which are being developed as part of this Erasmus Plus program. Until now, students have been receiving certificates for participation. As I said before, it can be an alternative program for English courses because it fits in very well. I feel very strongly, it's an authentic context for students to speak English. It's English as an international language. Students get used to hearing different accents. They get used to communicating online. They overcome their fear and inhibition, which they often have about speaking English. So it's a very easy place to include the program, but it can also be included. For example, one department has allowed students to choose it as an option. So they have 3 credits for extracurricular activities, and it's included, it's recognized as this. And also this and other programs, students have been doing virtual exchange as internships. So it's a virtual internship program. And as examples of the assessment of students, they, as I said, they write an individual reflective paper, they write a joint recommendations paper on a particular issue, looking at it from the perspectives of 3 different contexts. And then the professor receives facilitator reports on participation. This is just an example of text from a student reflection paper. And now this student, this was before Erasmus Plus, so she was, Erasmus Plus addresses young people. This student, however, was a mature student, and she was a policewoman with children, and she was not able to do a mobility experience, though she really wanted to. And the impact of the program on her was very powerful, though her English, was was at quite a low level, but she managed to relate the experience that she had online to her work as a policewoman. And she, as she reflected over the weeks, she kind of had it's difficult to explain.
A revelation.
A revelation. She kind of explored her issues, her prejudices, and managed to overcome some of the difficulties that she was having at work and in her own experience. So it can be a very impactful program. And this is perhaps what people don't understand. We're not claiming that it's the same as a mobility experience, but it can be a very powerful experience for students of intercultural.
Okay, we have two questions. Can we ask them now?
Yeah.
Please do.
Okay, one question from Sake Jager from Groningen. How about accreditation in terms of ECTS?
Now, so accreditation in terms of ECTS, that will depend on the university. So the programs that are being offered, what's very clear from the syllabus is they can indicate suggested ECTS, but it's the university that gives the ECTS. Do you know what I mean? So the information on the programs gives an idea of the objectives, how many hours students are involved in, but we see that it would be on the part of the university to have it recognised as ECTS. For example, I was in Bordeaux earlier this week, and they are working to get the another program, which is somewhat longer than the Solly Connect program. So there is a program called Refugees in Europe, which consists of, they say it's the equivalent of 5 ECTS. Now, the University of Bordeaux is going through the process of having this recognised with ECTS, but it's a long process. I mean, it has to go through various academic committees, and so I presume that that's the same in most universities. But yes, this is certainly something which universities are interested in doing, and
the decisions are made locally, though. It is not something. It's each university makes their own decisions.
Yeah, I mean, the Commission can't award ECTS for this.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. The second question from Shahira Nuria, Göttingen. Do the students get to suggest the topics, or is there a set they can pick and choose from?
Yeah, so in this program, precisely because it is included in university curricula, there is a shared online curriculum. So over the 8 weeks, say 4 or 5 of the weeks, there are certain issues and readings which the students will be addressing. But then over 3 or 4 of the weeks, it's the groups, the individual groups that decide on the topics. And yes, from a certain list of topics or any other topics that the students come. So it is student-led, but in order to enable universities to offer ECTS for it, and in order for it to be recognised, there needs to be some kind of shared curriculum from which the facilitators choose.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Another one question from Michela Cobelli, Pavia University. Francesca, how did the ECTS accreditation if students coming from all course degrees you offered?
I don't understand.
Sorry, I didn't hear the last part.
How did the ECTS accreditation, if students come from all course degrees you offered?
It depends on, so that is negotiated with the course directors.
Yep.
So, for example, in the language department, they recognise it as extra credits for approfondimento linguistico, so language development.
And it's 3, right?
And that's 3 ECTS for this online facilitated dialogue for 8 weeks. Students who are coming from other departments, I mean, that's something that is negotiated. So perhaps now I'm talking to somebody from sustainable development. I'm talking to the course director to see how it can be recognised. Again, this is something which is up to the course directors, and perhaps the universities could advise course directors on how it can be recognised. Some universities, Padova is now introducing kind of transversal courses, and again, this is something which could happen. It could be an option for students from any of the dialogue of the degree programmes. For example, now we have one on human rights and inclusion at the University of Padova. So what we're going to see is whether a virtual exchange programme with a certain number of hours could be one of these options that any student can be awarded credits for, but that's a decision which has to be taken at the level of university.
And I think I'll just add that I think this highlights the importance of having at least one person at an institution that is very familiar with the different programs and how they work, and can both recruit people but also work together with people in different departments in advising them on how they might decide to assign a certain number of credits. So you kind of need that coordinator person who, in our case, is Francesca, but that role is very important.
Okay, thank you. And the last question in this first part, okay, the question from François Doc of the University Catholic of Louvain. Who are the group facilitators? Are they academic professors?
So no, the facilitators are young people. Most of them are alumni. So most of them are students who have taken part in the program in the past. Because what I didn't say is that the facilitators, students who take part in the program can then do the training to become a facilitator for free. So there are two levels of training. There's basic training, which is open to all students, and then there is advanced training. In order to do the advanced training, students actually have to apply. So there is a selection process because a certain level of competence is required. And then in the Solia program, there are coaches and there's a whole quality control mechanism and support system for the facilitators. The European Commission is developing a community of facilitators. So one of the objectives of this program is actually to have a community of Erasmus Plus virtual exchange facilitators. And what we're hoping for is, and I believe there are some representatives from the Erasmus Student Network and ESU. I mean, what we'd really like, we think that perhaps students who have had a physical mobility experience would be particularly suited to join this European Erasmus Plus virtual exchange community of facilitators.
And the first training for facilitators for Erasmus Plus virtual exchange facilitators is ongoing right now. It's happening right now.
Yeah, so there is information online that the application forms are already there for interested students to apply for the facilitator training. So the idea is very much that they will, again, it'll be youth facilitators with a whole system of quality control. And yes, this is also, I think, a very important part of the program because it does offer opportunities to young people, and if the program expands as the Commissioner wishes it to expand, there will be a really strong need for a lot of facilitators.
And for what it's worth, facilitators, once they start facilitating as part of EVE at least, are paid a stipend.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's several phases to go through, but I mean, it will become an opportunity for young people to engage with this, and the skills develop. I mean, I did take the training myself too, and the training is open to professors, but for the Erasmus Virtual Exchange, because it's directed to young people, the aim is to have a group of young people becoming the facilitators. The skills developed in the facilitation can be applied to many different contexts. They can be applied to the classroom, they can be applied to family situations, they can be, because it's grounded in conflict transformation and these kind of dialogue skills. So yeah.
Okay,
so
thank you for all explanations. And now you can follow with presentation, okay?
Okay.
Yes.
So now I'm going to, this is kind of a shift because everything that Francesca has explained to you with this project about online facilitated dialogue is a program that is organized external to the university. And university students can participate in the program, but it is an external program. And what we're going to talk about now,
it's an independent program.
It's an independent program. It's an NGO who develops the program.
Well, it's promoted by the European Commission, but it's not. It doesn't require a lot of work from the professors.
Exactly. Okay. And what we're suggesting here, this other opportunity, are what are called transnational Erasmus Plus virtual exchange projects, in which 2 or more professors, but usually 2 professors, come together and embed a virtual exchange project into their existing courses. So what we offer is training for those professors to learn how to embed their own customized virtual exchange projects into their own courses. And so these are the characteristics of what we call transnational virtual exchange projects, and it's being run within the consortium by the Uni Collaboration organization. that 2 or more professors, who usually it's courses that already exist, and they decide that there is some area in which they can come together and share content and share a syllabus, and to add a new international component and develop these activities of online interaction, collaboration, digital competences, etc. So basically to enhance and enrich their existing courses. They are usually blended in that professors usually meet their students locally face-to-face, and then there is this additional component, which is the online component with students in another country. They last 6 to 8 weeks, 6 to 10 weeks, but the minimum really is 6 weeks. So you need to, in terms of academic calendars, for example, there needs to be an overlap of at least 6 weeks between the academic calendars in the 2 universities, because to really have a meaningful learning experience, you really need to dedicate some time at the beginning to students simply getting to know one another and learning to trust one another. In the context of Erasmus Plus Virtual Exchange, these will also have 2 facilitated synchronous video sessions. So students in your course working with students in another course would then have these sessions facilitated by one of these facilitators who are being trained in this period. So that conversations they might not necessarily have with the professor within this environment of facilitated dialogue where the facilitators are peers or near peers. It's kind of to probe more in depth into certain discussions that they're already having in the classroom. And it literally can be implemented in any subject or course. And these are just examples of students here at our university working together on one of these exchange projects. And you can see them, they are video conferencing with their fellow peers, and they're working on documents together, and they're very engaged. As Francesca said, it actually is a very meaningful, engaging experience. So I'm just going to give 2 examples to give you an idea of how these transnational virtual exchange projects can work. Very often people start with the idea that you need to find somebody who teaches the exact same course you teach in another country, or at least within the same discipline. So I'm going to give you 2 examples of how professors from very different disciplines can find common shared objectives and actually develop very productive projects. So in this case, there was one professor who was a professor of medical anthropology, and he wanted his students to have experience working with people from a different culture. He wanted them to gain experience working in a different medium, and to broaden their perspectives. And then he decided to partner with a professor from Egypt who teaches podcast production. And these seem very different, but the professor in Egypt wanted her students to do research on a topic that they were not familiar with, and to work on a collaborative project, and then understand how the media production process works. So with these 2 seemingly different courses and objectives, this is the project that they developed. So in the first step, students met together for 2 weeks, and initially to get to know one another. And students usually work in small groups. So it's usually groups of 2 in each class, for example, 2 to 3 students in each class. First, they do some icebreaker activities to get to know one another. And in this case, then they had to choose a health issue that they wanted to research in their respective countries, because this was the part from the medical anthropology teacher, right? And then in step 2, students individually did research on that health issue in their local context, but then they also went out and interviewed people locally to gauge their opinions and reactions to that health issue. So health issues ranging everything from, for example, the opioid crisis, or AIDS, or other things like this that are public health issues. And then students online using technology shared these interviews and research findings with one another. And then in the last step, which took 4 weeks, students had to come together in groups and discuss and negotiate which of all of this content that they had collected they actually wanted to use in a podcast that would be produced by the Egyptian students. And in the end, the Egyptian students produced the final podcast. So a lot of learning from one another and also learning outside of one's discipline and intense collaboration between these two groups, sorry. So that's one example. Another example is a little easier maybe to understand. It was called Media Literacy Across Cultures. And there was a course in media literacy and advertising in Ireland, and then it was an English as a second language course in Morocco. And similarly, these professors had more or less 3 steps in their project. The first step, which lasts 2 weeks, again, was getting to know one another. And at the same time, they also had shared readings and shared content to learn about the basic concepts of media literacy. And all of this was done in English. In step 2, students had to compare and contrast advertisements in the 2 countries and discuss the similarities and differences and try and understand why these similarities and differences exist, but also discuss critical issues surrounding advertisements and the impact they have on people and these sorts of things, especially in the respective cultures. And then in the 3rd week, they had to collaboratively create an advertisement. So here there was a lot of multimedia work that they actually did online that would be culturally appropriate in both countries. So again, there was these 3 phases, and this one lasted 8 weeks. So what are the advantages for students? I think there's one of the biggest advantages is the enthusiasm and motivation that they're really, it's especially for, I teach English as a second language, and students see it as just another English course, whereas when you get them engaged and actively interacting with students in another country, they are extremely enthusiastic and motivated, even if they are somewhat terrified at the beginning. But they get over that initial terror, and really enjoy it. And it also gets them out of their box and their comfort zone, and really helps them understand the influence of their own cultural experience on their ideas and their beliefs. And I think the self-reflection is a really important part of virtual exchange. It's the same thing in the programs that Francesca described. There's a lot of learning about oneself and why one thinks things the way they do. And then there are lots of different competences. So there's linguistic competence. And also in terms of linguistic competence, I always like to highlight the fact that particularly for the English speakers, who do not have, especially if they're monolingual, who do not have much experience interacting with other speakers of English who are not native speakers, it can be extremely instructional for them and really develop their ability to communicate with non-native speakers in English. And communicative competence, digital, and a lot of teamwork, online teamwork. And we think these are also, to be honest, employability skills, because very often today people have job interviews online and they have to work with teams who are in different countries. And the advantages, there are also advantages for professors.
Because it's very time consuming. I mean, it's not easy. It is a time consuming activity, which, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I've been doing this for many, many, many years, and sometimes people say, why do you keep on doing this? And you do it because it is beneficial to the students, and you really see this enhanced learning going on. But also, I mean, the things that I've written here, I think it's a good opportunity to stop and reflect on the way you teach and maybe learn about different ways of teaching from your partner teacher. It's an opportunity to work together with an international colleague. And you learn a lot about yourself and about your colleagues' culture. I mean, even things, at the beginning you have basic discussions about logistics and academic calendars and how many hours students spend in the classroom every week and what kind of assessment they have. And you find extreme differences. And then you have to be able to explain these differences to your colleague, and they explain them to you. And so there's a lot of learning that goes on between the 2 colleagues as well. And I find another thing that's interesting is a lot of professors who are drawn to this type of activity are people who have been teaching kind of the same course for many years and are looking for a way to change and enrich and enhance the course. And integrating a virtual exchange project into the course is one way to do that. And there are also advantages for the university by doing this. So yes, it requires a lot of work. But we have found that it does promote interest in the Erasmus mobility programs, that students do not go on Erasmus for a variety of reasons, but there is, a certain group of the population that is either afraid, or it seems so unfamiliar to them, or they think they don't have time to do it within their degree course. And then they have one of these experiences and they become very excited about the idea of going, and sometimes going to the country where their partner class was located.
In fact, now we're working on another project where there is one of the partnerships is between Valladolid, I think, in Spain and Hungary. And they, as a result of the project, they have actually set up a new Erasmus kind of agreements, and they have a large number of students going who are applied to go to Poland and vice versa. So it really does seem to, foster an interest in mobility.
Exactly. It can also be used to prepare students for mobility. And even at the University of Padova, for example, we have a program, a pre-Erasmus program. So students, before they go mobility, actually start meeting students in Padova and having conversations with them, so that when they come to Padova for their mobility experience, they already know people and have already started considering what the cultural differences might be. It's universities talk a lot about, you were saying at the beginning, internationalization. This, I think, is authentic internationalization. Students are not learning about others, they're learning with others and from others. And so I think it's a very authentic way to internationalize. And eventually, with the example that Francesca just said, it can also support and lead to the creation of strategic interinstitutional agreements. But what's nice about these virtual exchange projects, the first time you do them, is that you do not need those agreements. Yeah. So two professors can, since that is a bureaucratic process and it does take time to come up with those agreements, two professors can come together and start developing their own projects, because all assessment and is done locally. So, you maintain your kind of local autonomy, but then you do this shared work together. And we have found that these are really these are the things that make these types of projects successful, that the institution really create a team of people. So there needs to be administrative staff and technical staff that help support professors who decide to do this type of activity. There needs to be support on the part of the central administration and directors. For example, you might give a professor course release. So one semester, instead of doing 3 courses, if they do one that's virtual exchange, they only do 2. So they have time to dedicate to developing their virtual exchange. And then in terms of learning, it's really important that the two professors working together establish clear pedagogic objectives before thinking about the technologies, because what needs to come first is learning. And I think today there's so many technologies out there that's a secondary problem. There really needs to be a positive relationship between the two partners and their universities, and you need to be extremely flexible. So you need to dedicate a lot of time at the beginning to planning everything very carefully, but then once you're actually implementing these projects, you need to be flexible to adapt to what is working, what's not working, what you would like to spend more time on, less time, etc.
Okay, so a really important part of this Erasmus Plus virtual exchange initiative is the issue of recognition, and this is something that the Commission really strongly wanted. And so we've developed these open badges, and I know some universities, for example, Galway, are already working with open badges. And essentially, open badges are an online tool which show that students have taken, and also lecturers. So these are the badges for the training to develop virtual exchange projects. What we didn't say, as part of this Erasmus Plus virtual exchange, there are various 2 training courses for professors who want to develop their programs. So professors who take part in this training will get badges, but also students who take part in any of the virtual exchanges will get badges. What the badge does, it's like a kind of glorified link which takes you to a homepage and shows that what the students have had to do, so the criteria for earning this badge. And it's a verifiable link, so there's been a lot of work on badges now, because students can put them in their kind of online portfolios, And there's also talk of linking badges to the diploma supplement, and this is something we're going to work on. And I think it will be interesting to have perhaps another webinar on the issue of badges, because the value of badges is when they are endorsed by institutions. So it's universities need to recognise badges and employers recognise badges. So the Commission has launched this project with badges, offering students recognition of this, so it counts, like a certificate, but not fakeable. That was the word.
More difficult
to fake, which can actually feed into students' diploma supplements. And this is important because, again, it's a formal recognition of those skills which are gained, which employers value, but which aren't always reflected in students' academic records.
And I think, just to add one small thing, you were asking before about the credit system. Up until this point, for example, my students get the usual number of credits for the course that I do, but there's no recognition for the exchange project that they do within my course. And so for me as a teacher, I'm very happy that now my students, in addition to getting the credits they usually get for my course, they will also get a badge that shows that they've had this kind of international experience.
Online international
experience.
So just to close, the geographical area to be covered with Erasmus Plus Virtual Exchange for this pilot year, and the Commission is, exploring whether they will want to expand it to other areas, are the Erasmus Plus program countries and the Southern Mediterranean region. There are other projects, for example, Groningen, the Evolve project, which we mentioned before, for Coimbra Group partners, will be also supporting universities who are interested in developing virtual exchange outside of this area. So I think more information can be provided about that later on. So what we want to close with is how to get involved, because the portal has just gone online and it's still very much in development, and we realise that it's perhaps not clear for universities concretely how they can get involved at this stage. So, I mean, if you are thinking of introducing the Erasmus Plus Virtual Exchange Programme to your universities, it's important to identify who at the university could be the kind of promoter who could actually, learn about all the different programmes and establish perhaps a strategy for promoting it. It could be international relations, international office, the international relations office, or student services. There is now the possibility for online facilitated dialogue to express interest in the programs which will be promoted next academic year, so next semester. So it's important before the summer that universities express an interest, and perhaps with an indication of the number of students that they would hope to involve in this program through this online form, and so they can kind of get themselves in there. Some kind of agreement will be signed, and then the activity will be promoted, as I said, at Padova we've promoted it through the International Relations website, student services, and as I said, the Inclusion Office, but also the Language Centre plays an important role in advertising it, because again, it's a free opportunity for language, authentic language practice, and recognition of this language practice.
Mm-hmm. Francesca, can I have one question related to the things that you said now?
We've nearly finished. We've just got one more slide.
Okay, so go on. Yes,
yeah?
please.
Okay, and in terms of these transnational virtual exchange projects that you might be interested in integrating into courses at your university, so again, you need to kind of identify this person who is the promoter of virtual exchange on your campus, but then you would identify professors who think their courses would benefit from it, or very often they're professors who already collaborate internationally on research and could integrate some of that activity they're doing into a virtual exchange project in their course so that their students benefit from that collaboration. You can also exploit joint degree programs, especially when there's travel involved. Very often doing virtual exchange is a nice thing to do with students before or after they travel. And in particular, identify degree programs which have a low participation rate in mobility. For example, I teach at primary education, and the students in primary education tend not to go abroad. And this is one way to give them an international experience. And if you're interested, basically, what you can take advantage of from Erasmus plus virtual exchange is training for professors. And we have this advanced training, which will be starting in May, which will take professors literally kind of from the first steps of figuring out what their objectives are through developing the tasks and choosing the technologies so that they can implement one of these courses in the fall semester.
Okay.
And these are the members of the consortium. And we will actually close with, we are part of an organization that is having a conference where?
In Krakow.
In Krakow.
Perfect.
In April. And it was funny because the picture here was the same one that you were kind of webcasting at the beginning of our experience today. So there's that conference. We hopefully be meeting some of you when we come in April.
It's about virtual exchange. Yeah.
Yes, actually this is the view from the window from the room where we are now in the eLearning Center.
It's a nice view.
Yeah,
not bad.
Thank you very much for this comprehensive presentation. Now we can open discussion, and immediately I will read you the first question from Luisa Bunescu from European University Association. She asked if there will be a call for interested universities to apply for such transnational Erasmus virtual exchange projects.
Basically, what you can do right now is you can go onto the UniCollaboration website, which is unicollaboration.org, and there is a section.
There's a form on this.
There is a form. Well, I don't know if it's working. It wasn't working earlier.
Okay. Well.
Yeah. Okay. Well, anyway, you can go to the youth portal, or you can go to our website and projects and Erasmus plus virtual exchange. There's also information about Evolve. But here it will take you to a form where you can express interest, and then we will send you information about the advanced training that will start in May. And if you are interested and you don't have a partner, we can support you in maybe finding a partner. It's easier if you already do have a partner. And what we will do is send you another form, a very simple form, which is a proposal for the type of course that you might want to do.
Okay.
Okay, another question. Virgin Rage from Montpellier University, okay, France. Did you experience virtual exchange with United States or Asia? How do you deal with jet lag?
Okay.
It's interesting. We, as an organization, UniCollaboration, most of the people on the board were involved in a project that was 2011, 2013, where we actually kind of did a state of the art of this type of activity. And we found that most virtual exchange is actually east-west and not north-south. And that there is a very high number of exchanges between the US and Europe, and a very small number of exchanges
within Europe
and north-south. So, in our case, it would be Europe and Africa, and the United States, North and South America. And the time zone issue, you always find ways around it. I mean, it really is.
It's a problem. I mean, it's more difficult for synchronous.
It's more difficult for synchronous, but I mean, I have so many anecdotal stories of, professors convincing their students to show up at 7 a.m. and they take, coffee and brioche and the first time, but then the students, once they have their first synchronous session, they are so excited and enthusiastic about it that showing up at university at times that might not be traditional is something they are willing to do. The alternative is also having students do it independently on their own time, because some students are actually awake at 3 a.m. in the morning. So,
but it's not part of Erasmus plus virtual exchange.
Okay, thank you. Another question from Philip Prihoda, European Students' Union. I'm certainly having some doubts about facilitators unpaid. How does it work so far? And also about the number of these facilitators that would be needed.
I mean, the facilitators do. I mean, the volunteer facilitator community that already exists is amazing. I mean, the facilitators do it because they believe in what they do, and they always. I mean, I've done it. I've worked.
Okay.
I've worked as a facilitator, as a volunteer facilitator, and it is a kind of competence building, exciting experience that people do because they actually get a lot out of it in terms of personal gratification, of professional development, and through it they find other forms of employment. There is going to be, now I don't know exactly at the moment how it works, but once people have gone through the training and have facilitated, there will be paid facilitators. But the clarification is, that the mechanisms of that aren't yet available, but it's something that until now we've had no trouble finding facilitators. But it would be very interesting, to talk with the with representatives from the student unions, and ESU and ESN. Please write to us. We can give our email addresses because we really would like to have deeper discussions with you about the project.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. Another question from Sake Jagielonian. What are the other forms other than online facilitated dialogue about?
What are the other
forms other than online facilitated dialogue about?
What you mean, the advocacy training and?
Or do you mean the
the interactive open online courses? Is that what he means?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So the advocacy training is it's mainly for youth organisations, and it is more in the form of debate. So it's online debating, which will be using the same platform, and the interactive open online courses are similar to the facilitated dialogue, but there are going to be various different kinds of programs. Currently, there is a program running, and it's called Refugees in Europe, and it's a 10-week program, and it combines video lectures every week with facilitated synchronous dialogue sessions. So there is more content than there is in the dialogue programs. What they are doing is they are working with other providers of content and MOOC providers to add an interactive dimension to content, to MOOCs or other forms of content. We're currently working with a consortium who are developing a program on gender and media, and that will be, again, it will provide video content, and then the dialogue sessions will be based around the content. So that's the activity, interactive open online courses. And these interactive open online courses are also developing a MOOC for facilitator training, which will combine, again, content and the principles of facilitation with the actual practice of interaction. So all of these different activities have a synchronous dialogue component. This is what the baseline is. Okay, so for the European Commission, virtual exchange includes synchronous facilitated dialogue in small groups of young people. If the projects don't have this component, then they're not considered virtual exchange within the European Commission's program.
Okay.
Okay, another question from Elin Nauta, Leiden University. I would like to know how these teachers are brought together. So, for example, if a teacher from Leiden would like to bring this virtual exchange in his course, how can he find another teacher from another university?
One of the members of we have, as Uni Collaboration, we have networks of people who already work in universities across Europe. But one of the members of our organization is the Unimed, and they have a large network of universities across Southern Europe primarily, and then North Africa and the Middle East. And one of the reasons that they are a member of the EVE Consortium is because they have this ability to reach out to their partners in the various universities and help people who, at a European university, for example, who might be interested in working with somebody in North Africa or the Middle East. So we
And
have
also the Coimbra Group. I mean, the Coimbra Group is not officially involved in the program, but the Coimbra Group is a network which can also support in finding partners. So, if people write and express an interest and say that they are looking for a partner, then we can certainly work to finding partners.
Okay. Przechodzimy dalej.
Okay, now we have a question from Jagielonian University. Yes?
I am Mariusz Cichoń. I am an academic teacher, and as far as my practice is saying, so my practice with students is saying that more than 90% of students are not really interested in mobility. Yeah? So do you have any advice how to encourage them to become interested in such a... Because generally I see this idea very powerful and very interesting. But how to encourage students to get involved?
I think here there's also this difference between the program that Francesca described, which is provided by an external organization to the university, so with an existing program, compared to what I talked about, which was professors integrating something into their course. In the case of the transnational projects that I discussed, you're not necessarily giving your students a choice, and which is one thing that I like about it and have found very powerful about it.
You put them in a situation that they don't have no.
Exactly.
If it's an integral part of your course, then it is. Yeah.
Exactly. They have to do it, and that's, I think, in that situation you really are reaching people who tend to be resistant to this idea, because once they start engaging with their international peers, they finally see that it is interesting and beneficial.
Okay, so
I mean, interestingly, the people, can I just say, the people who have, for me, this online facilitated dialogue has always been optional, and the students who do choose to take part are very often those who have had an Erasmus experience, or those who come from an international family who are open to this kind of experience. I mean, a lot of students are quite scared about the intercultural component and the online component.
That's the problem. Yeah.
Exactly, but I think this is also one of the reasons why the Commission is pushing it, because they see the value of kind of making more students participate in this kind of experience, which does exist in isolated chapters, but the students who take part, yes, are limited. So again, a lot of the focus will also be on a media campaign, which I think will become important to encourage students to take part in this kind of experience.
Yeah, and I think in my experience as well, students who I have forced to do it in my English course, then are interested in projects like the ones Francesca talked about, right? Because they've gotten their first taste of it, and then they want more.
Exactly. Once they start, they often continue. So, they might start, they might do a program, and then they might train to become a facilitator, or they might do and have an experience within a course, and then look for other opportunities.
So you mean if we would like to develop this system here at the Jagiellonian University, we should rather focus on professors, not on the students first?
Well, you could do both. I mean, the way I often see it is that you can have a portfolio. You can offer different experiences. So you can offer the online facilitated dialogue through the international office, perhaps. You can, that can be available for students, because it's really, I mean, there's very little work for you to do as a university to promote that. And then also work with the professors to insert it. I mean, I think both can be done in parallel, because it really costs you very little to offer, those kind of experiences which are pre-packaged for you. Then they can be integrated into courses, and there are various ways in which they can be integrated, but they're also standalone, so they don't take you much extra work.
And they target different student groups, I think.
And they might target different student groups, yeah. But I think what we should be thinking of is developing a kind of portfolio of the different kind of Erasmus Plus virtual exchange experiences that are available.
Okay, I see it much better now. Thanks.
Please close the presentation.
If you close presentation, we will be seen
also in
Yes,
from
in
Krakow.
Krakow. Yeah.
Oh, you mean
no.
so that you don't see the presentation?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. Okay, two last questions.
Is that better?
Oh, yes, okay. That's perfect. Okay, another question from Bart Gładysz, Warsaw University of Technology. Do you have any experience with virtual exchange mixed with short period mobility? When between physical short periods meeting, virtual exchange is applied?
Yeah, I mean, a really exciting project that, so what is now the interactive online course, which was organised by Sharing Perspectives, who also, they offered a course last year. And what was really, I thought, really clever and interesting about that is that they offered the virtual exchange. They had, I think there were 10 or 12 university partners taking part in this exchange. So there was Trinity in Dublin, Padova, various universities in Europe had, say, between 10 and 20 students participating. And so they took part in the program and they did various collaborative projects. They did a survey. And at the end of this virtual exchange, one student from each of the participating universities was selected to go to Brussels with the group. And they had a week of physical exchange presenting the results of the research they had done to various stakeholders in Brussels. Now, this was all organised by the organisation, and that won't be done again. But we've already had a lot of expressions of interest from professors who do have these kind of mobility programs. For example, in Bordeaux, there was somebody the other day who was telling me that they have... Yes, they would like to introduce this to prepare the students for a mobility project to Morocco, which is part of their which is part of their program.
But I also have lots of examples. I worked in the United States for a year and a half, and there were many courses that we developed where the students did a virtual exchange for 6 to 8 weeks, and then the end of that was a trip to the country. And so it was one group usually going to the country. And in all of those cases, not all of the students were able to go for financial reasons, whatever, but a large majority were. And it's becoming a very common model, actually, because it relates back to what I said before. In those 8 weeks of virtual exchange, students who might not have thought they'd want to go visit someplace, after having worked with peers in that country for 8 weeks, think, oh, well, maybe I do want to go. So
also for the professors. I mean, professors can have them, themselves go on a mobility project to also, to plan the project together. I mean, it would work, and it would probably, support.
Okay, thank you very much. The last question from Katarina Güttner from University of Würzburg. What are the experiences with recognition for teachers? It was said that such a project is time-consuming. Will their initiative count towards the hours they have to teach during a semester?
Universities.
So we're both laughing, so that's not I think recognition has been a very big problem. And I think one big step forward with the Erasmus Plus Virtual Exchange is the badges. Because teachers who do professors who do the training and implement these courses will get badges and certificates. And now then there's the process of, with the badges that Fran was talking about before, of having endorsements from the universities. So for example, we at the University of Padova are working with our badge office. And if they recognize the badges that the Erasmus Plus Virtual Exchange gives people, then in terms of promotion and those sorts of things, teachers will be able to include them in their portfolio. So that's one issue. The other issue is time and effort. And there are two approaches to that. One is there are universities where teachers are actually paid, maybe I think Groningen, I think in one of the projects they set up, teachers were given a stipend to develop these courses. I know of universities where you're given a stipend every time you do a course, it just decreases each time you do it. And there are lots of public universities that cannot afford to do that. But what they might be able to afford to do is what we call course release, so that instead of having to teach 3 courses, if you commit to internationalizing your course through virtual exchange in a transnational project, your department takes 1 course away from you that semester or the previous semester so that you have time to dedicate to it. But some
universities have been doing this for teachers who engage in English medium instruction. I know that, some... Okay, not in the UK, but in some universities where teachers are transforming their course from, say, Italian to English, they get a course reduction. In principle, the same thing could be applied. It's up to, I suppose, professors to negotiate with the universities. I think the fact that it has become an Erasmus Plus virtual exchange project should support the value of this, because if the Commission has recognised the value of this kind of this project, then it should be easier for universities to recognise the value of this project. But
depends on the university.
Depends on the university.
Okay.
Okay. If it's all, thank you very much.
Yes.
Being
Thank
here
you
with
very much,
us.
and we're happy to reply to any emails. Jacek, you can share our email addresses, so if anybody would like to contact us personally, that's absolutely fine. And then there is also, we'd say, go and see the youth portal as well. So thank you very much for organising this.
Thank you. Thank you. Have a good day.
And thank you to everyone online.
Thank you, everybody online, yes.
Thank you.
Then I don't know how to...
Huh?